Since in this course I use Duik script for rigging and skeletonize my character, it's better before I start to rig my character, I get to know Duik Bassel script and tools I use in this course generally, so when I started the training and started to rig the character, I don't have any kind of ambiguity. First, I run Duik Bassel. As soon as I run Duik Bassel, a panel will be shown to us, which is Welcome to Duik Bassel. Here, I can see different panels of Duik Bassel: rigging panel, automation, animation, camera, and tool. I go into rigging panel. When the creating structures option is enabled, you can see options about skeletonizing your character. The first option is hominoid, which creates a full structured skeleton of the human's body. As you can see, skeletons have been created, and here I can see layers related to these skeletons. Well, I go back to the Duik Bassel. I hit Ctrl Z so I can go back to the first state. Well, next options are arm, leg, spine, tail. These panels are for creating skeletons for those parts. These options are used when you want to manually create skeletons for those parts. If I go into each one of these option settings, you can see there are three options. The first one is for animals that are similar to human like bear and bunny. The next option is for animals with claws, and the next option is for hoofed animals. Below shows the form of the skeleton, and here you can select what kind of skeleton you need for your character's hand. For example, if you want the shoulder bone, you should enable shoulder, and if you don't, disable it. Any part you want here, you can have it by enabling the related option. If I enable claws, you can see the hand part of animals with claws will show. For example, I need these three parts and then I click on Create. As you see, 3 skeletons have been created for me. The next option I should explain about is Duplicate. This option is used for duplicating the skeletons you have been created. For example, I created this skeleton and I want to duplicate this form and shape. If I do this by pressing Ctrl D, you can see that it gets ruined. To avoid this, I select the skeletons and use the duplicate option, and if I drag it this side, you can see that the skeletons are duplicated correctly by the same shape and form. At the end, I have the auto rig option, which I have in link and constraint panel. This option is for rigging your character's skeleton automatically. Let me delete these layers. Let's create a hominoid skeleton. Let me first note that the skeleton I created is not rigged at all. As you can see, when I move the hip bone, none of the skeletons affects another and they are completely detached. But if I select all of the skeletons and go in Duik Bassel and use Auto Rig in the Structure panel, or I go to Rig and Constraint panel and use the Auto Rig, you can see that my character is completely rigged and controllers have been created for it. And in Timeline, new layers have been created which their colors are green and every one of them initially has C in their phrases, meaning they are the controller layers. And now, if you pay attention, if I move the hip, every other part of the skeleton is affected and moved by this movement, and they are completely rigged and are attached to each other. I go back to Duik Bassel, and the next option I should explain is zero, which by this option, we can zero the layer's position without changing their location. So I can easily get back my layer or controller to its first position. For example, I select this controller and click on 0. As you can see, its position is 0 and now Doesn't matter how much I move this controller, if I want it back to its first place, is enough to change its position to 0. As you can see, it gets back to its first place. Well, the next panel is automation, which have auxiliary tools for creating different animations. The next panel is the animation, which is related to keyframes and animation. In this panel, you can easily control different kinds of keyframes and its graphs. The next panel is related to the camera movements. And the last panel is the tool, which you can have different tools here. I will give a general explanation about rename tools because I'm going to use it during my course. This tool, as it's obvious from its name, is for naming the layers more easily. For example, this is the skeleton of my character's left hand. I select it and I want to delete number 2, which is on the end of these layers. For this, I click on the last option and then type number 2, meaning 2 characters from the last of my layers' names should be removed. So I type 2 and click on rename. As you can see, 2's are deleted. And if I want to add a letter at the first of the layers' names, for example, I want to add L, meaning these skeletons belong to my character's left hand. I use the prefix option and here I add L and an underline and then click on rename. As you can see, L is added to my layers. If I want to change my layer's name completely, it's enough to write here hand for example. As you can see, all of the layers are renamed to hand. And if I want to rename all layers to hand but number 2, it's enough to check the number box and then click on rename. As you can see, all of the layers are renamed to hand with numbers in order at the end of them. Suffix option is used for adding a character at the end of the layer's names. For example, I hit space and write left. Let me delete this one too, so it doesn't add again. Then I click on rename. As you can see, left is added to the end of my layers' names and numbers are placed after them. I hit Ctrl Z, disable number, and again I click on rename. That left is added at the end of the layers. Remove the first option is used for removing a character from first. Well, I click on this and type 2 to remove 2 characters from the first of my layer's name. If I want the added left to be removed, I type 5 in remove the last and remove the left I added here so it doesn't add again. As you can see, layers names are back to what they were. Now, I'm familiar with the options I want to work with. If you wanted to get familiar with Duik Bassel script completely and know all of the uses of options in these panels and the way of working with them in rigging and animating the character, I recommend you to watch the rig and animate the character in Duik Bassel course, because there I had explained all of the tools and their usage completely, and it can be so useful for those who want to follow the character's rig and animate professionally.